How far would you go to escape a life you never chose? What if the only way back to the person you love most means crossing a line from which there is no return? In 1993, in the quiet suburbs of Fort Worth, Texas, a teenage girl made a decision that would shock her community and haunt her for the rest of her life. This is the story of Marie Robards, a promising student, a daughter torn by family strife, and a killer whose motive was rooted not in greed or rage, but in a desperate longing for home. What will drive a 16-year-old honor student to murder her father over dinner? The answer lies in a twisted web of family dysfunction, resentment, and a desperate desire to escape. In the summer of 1992, Fort Worth, Texas, presented itself as any typical American suburb. Neighborhoods are filled with single-family homes, backyard barbecues, and teenagers preparing for the upcoming school year. Among them was Marie Robards, an intelligent 16-year-old with flowing brown hair and an affinity for Shakespeare. By all accounts, Marie appeared to be a normal, high-achieving teenager, a gifted student who participated in theater and maintained a solid GPA. But beneath this veneer of normalcy lay a fractured family. Marie's parents had divorced when she was young, splitting her world in two. Her mother, Beth, had primary custody, while her father, Steven Robards, maintained a presence in his daughter's life through regular visitation. The arrangement, while not ideal, provided Marie with some stability during her formative years. Everything changed when Beth met and married Frank Burroughs, a man significantly older than her. The considerable age difference between Marie's mother and her new stepfather created immediate tension within the household. Marie, already navigating the complex emotions of adolescence, found herself increasingly uncomfortable with her mother's choice of partner. The age gap between Beth and Frank was immediately noticeable to everyone in their social circle, remarked a former neighbor who knew the family. But more concerning was how it affected the family dynamic, particularly for Marie, who seemed to withdraw more and more as time went on. As Frank took on a more authoritative role within the household, Marie felt increasingly alienated. The once close relationship with her mother began to deteriorate under the shadow of this new marriage. Marie's disapproval of the relationship was apparent, creating a palpable tension whenever the three were together. For a time, Marie bounced between households, her mother and stepfather, her father, and even her paternal grandparents. But in 1992, at age 16, she made a decision that would set the stage for tragedy. She moved in with her father, Steven, a 38-year-old engineer who lived alone in another part of Fort Worth. Steven Robards welcomed his daughter with open arms. A hard-working, mild-mannered professional, he saw this as an opportunity to strengthen his relationship with his daughter during her crucial teenage years. Friends described Steven as a devoted father who would do anything for Marie. He rearranged his work schedule to accommodate her school activities and created a comfortable space for her in his modest home. For Marie, however, the decision to live with her father was made in haste, a reaction to the uncomfortable dynamic at her mother's house rather than a well-thought-out plan. Within weeks of moving in, Marie began to regret her choice. This is because Steven's parenting style was stricter than she had anticipated. He enforced curfews, monitored her schoolwork closely, and maintained household rules that Marie found restrictive after the relative freedom she had enjoyed at her mother's house before Frank's arrival. Moreover, Stephen's modest income meant fewer luxuries than what Marie had grown accustomed to. Most significantly, Marie deeply missed her mother. Despite the complications created by Frank's presence, the bond between mother and daughter remained strong in Marie's heart. She began to idealize her previous life and convinced herself that if only she could return to living with her mother, everything would be perfect again. By the spring of 1993, Marie had made up her mind to return to her mother's home. She approached Beth about moving back only to face an unexpected obstacle. Frank, asserting his position as head of the household, had declared that Marie could not return. The reasons were never entirely clear. Perhaps it was the ongoing tension between him and his stepdaughter, or maybe financial considerations. Regardless of the motivation, the message was clear. Marie was not welcome back. This rejection devastated the teenager. Trapped in a living situation she no longer wanted, and barred from returning to her mother, Marie began to spiral mentally. Her academic performance, once stellar, began to slip. Teachers noticed her becoming withdrawn in class, and friends reported mood swings and unusual behavior. What none of these observers realized was that Marie was contemplating a solution so extreme it defied comprehension. If her father were no longer in the picture, she reasoned, she would have no choice but to return to her mother's home. Frank's objections would be irrelevant in the face of necessity. Marie's extensive reading had included classic literature, where poisoning was a plot device, most notably Shakespeare's Hamlet, which she had studied in her English class. The parallel to Claudius poisoning King Hamlet would later send chills through investigators when they understood the full scope of Marie's plan. Marie Robards was not only a theater enthusiast, but also excelled in science. Her advanced chemistry class gave her access to a variety of chemicals under supervised conditions. It was here that Marie's desperate plan found its means of execution. During a chemistry lab session in the spring of 1993, Marie managed to steal a quantity of barium acetate, a toxic compound used in certain chemical demonstrations. Colorless and with a slightly bitter taste that could be masked in food, barium acetate causes severe gastrointestinal symptoms when ingested, followed by muscular paralysis, cardiac arrhythmias, and potentially death. The theft went unnoticed, just a small amount of a chemical that wasn't closely monitored. Marie stored the stolen compound in a small container and brought it home, hiding it in her bedroom while she finalized her plans. On June 5, 1993, Marie decided to act. Steven had returned home from work, tired after a long day. Marie offered to make dinner, an unusual gesture that nevertheless delighted her father, who saw it as a sign of their improving relationship. She prepared his favorite meal, spaghetti with homemade sauce. What Steven didn't know was that Marie had mixed the barium acetate into his portion of the sauce, carefully stirring it to ensure it dissolved completely. The bitter taste was masked by the strong flavors of garlic and herbs in the sauce. The meal looked perfectly normal, a detective would later note. There was nothing visibly wrong with the food. It was the perfect crime in that sense, invisible until it was too late. Father and daughter sat down to dinner together. Marie ate her untainted portion while watching her father consume the poisoned meal. Within an hour, Steven began experiencing severe stomach pains. He dismissed it as food poisoning or an upset stomach, but his condition rapidly deteriorated. Marie watched as her father suffered intense gastrointestinal distress, followed by muscle weakness and difficulty breathing. When Stephen collapsed on the floor, gasping for breath and clutching his chest, Marie finally called 911, but not before waiting long enough to ensure the poison had taken full effect. The 911 call is chilling in hindsight, commented the lead detective on the case. Marie sounds appropriately panicked, but now we know she was the cause of the very emergency she was reporting. Paramedics arrived quickly but found Stephen in critical condition. Despite their best efforts to save him, Steven Robards was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at the hospital. He was just 38 years old. The attending physician, finding no obvious signs of foul play and noting Stephen's symptoms resembled those of a heart attack, listed cardiac arrest as the cause of death. No autopsy was performed, a decision that would allow Marie's crime to go undetected for nearly a year. With her father dead, Marie's plan proceeded as she had hoped. With no other guardian available, she returned to live with her mother and Frank. Despite Frank's previous objections, the circumstances left no alternative. Marie was, after all, still a minor in need of parental care. Back in her mother's home, Marie maintained the appearance of a grieving daughter. She accepted condolences from friends and family, attended the funeral with appropriate solemnity, and spoke movingly about her father during the service. Those who witnessed her behavior saw nothing but a teenager processing the sudden, tragic loss of her parent. She seemed genuinely devastated, recalled one of Beth's friends who attended the funeral. She clung to her mother throughout the service. No one had any reason to suspect anything sinister. Marie returned to school that fall, entering her junior year with the sympathetic support of teachers and peers who attributed any academic struggles or emotional outbursts to her recent loss. For several months, it appeared that Marie had gotten away with murder, but the perfect crime began to unravel, not through forensic evidence or police work, but through Marie's own conscience. As weeks turned into months, the psychological burden of what she had done began to crush her. Marie started experiencing nightmares about her father's final moments. She became increasingly withdrawn, even from her mother. Her academic performance, which had temporarily improved after returning to her mother's home, plummeted once again. Most tellingly, she began making cryptic comments to friends about unforgivable mistakes and living with terrible secrets. During a study of Hamlet in her English class, Marie became visibly upset during discussions of the poisoning scene. Her reaction was so severe that her teacher pulled her aside after class to check on her well-being. Marie deflected, blaming her emotional response on lingering grief over her father. The breaking point came in early 1994, nearly a year after Stephen's death. Marie had developed a close friendship with a classmate named Stacy, who became concerned about Marie's increasingly erratic behavior. During a sleepover at Stacy's house, Marie broke down in tears. "I can't keep this inside anymore," she reportedly told her friend. "I did something terrible. It's eating me alive." Stacy listened in horror as Marie confessed to poisoning her father with barium acetate stolen from the chemistry lab. She detailed the planning, the theft, the careful preparation of the fatal meal, and how she had watched him die while delaying the 911 call. The confession was comprehensive and devastating. Shocked and uncertain about what to do with this information, Stacy eventually confided in her own mother, who immediately contacted the authorities. When detectives approached Marie with her friend's account, they expected denials. Instead, they were stunned when Marie calmly confirmed everything. She provided details that only the perpetrator could have known and explained her motive: the desperate desire to return to her mother after being rejected by her stepfather. The case represents one of the most disturbing examples of family dysfunction I've encountered, noted the lead prosecutor. A teenager so desperate to escape one home situation that she was willing to permanently eliminate the other option. Steven's body was exhumed, and an autopsy was finally performed. Toxicology tests confirmed the presence of barium in his tissues, consistent with barium acetate poisoning. The medical examiner officially changed the cause of death from heart attack to homicide by poisoning. Despite being a juvenile at the time of the crime, Marie was charged as an adult due to the premeditated nature of the murder. Her trial began in January 1995, drawing national attention for its shocking circumstances: a teenage honor student poisoning her father to resolve a living arrangement. Marie's defense team argued diminished capacity due to the emotional trauma of family disruption and the psychological impact of her mother's relationship with a much older man. They painted a picture of a desperate child making an impulsive, albeit horrific, decision while in emotional distress. The prosecution countered with evidence of premeditation: the theft of the barium acetate, the careful planning of the murder, and Marie's subsequent attempts to conceal her actions. They emphasized that Marie had alternatives. She could have sought help from school counselors, reached out to other relatives, or even pursued legal emancipation given her age. After a 2-week trial and 3 days of deliberation, the jury found Marie Robards guilty of first-degree murder. In February 1995, she was sentenced to 28 years in prison. The judge, acknowledging Marie's age and lack of prior criminal history, recommended she be eligible for parole after serving half her sentence. The case of Marie Robards serves as a stark reminder of how family fractures can sometimes lead to irreparable damage. A father lost his life, a mother lost her child to prison, and a young woman lost her future, all stemming from a perfect storm of divorce, remarriage, rejection, and a teenager's inability to see beyond her immediate circumstances. The murder of Steven Robards by his daughter Marie is a story that defies easy answers. It is a tragedy born of love and longing, of broken families and broken hearts. It is a reminder that the line between victim and perpetrator can be thin, and that beneath the surface of every family, there are stories we may never fully understand. As you reflect on this story, consider the silent battles being fought in the homes around you. Consider the power of empathy, the importance of listening, and the need for compassion, even and especially when it is hardest to give. Marie was not a monster, but a girl who made a terrible, irreversible choice,